All right, are you ready for Principle 2? I'm sharing 5 principles over the next 5 days. We did Principle 1 yesterday, and that was the line. Hopefully, you got a little bit of benefit and value out of that. Good question. What side of the line are you on today? Now that you're more aware of it, you've been able to see where you tend to be. We're going to be talking about that a little bit today. We're going to be talking about not just the line, but the pull that you can have to one side or other of the line. Remember to figure out what side of the line you're on. Ask yourself, what are my feelings? What are my thoughts? What are my actions? What are my results? All those things are telling you right now what side of the line you're on. Okay, let's jump into the next principle, and that is the principle of the pull. Let me pull up this. You can see here we have the line right there, positive or negative. Reduce my screen there. Okay, positive or negative. You may find as you're more aware about which side of the line you're on and that the line even exists, you may find that you'd love to be over here in the positive side, but you find yourself constantly over here in the negative side. And we try and be in the net positive, you try, but it's like, in fact, it's like this. It's like we're over here on the positive side, or at least that's what we want to be, but we have this huge magnet over here, and it just keeps zapping us over to that side. And remember, on that side of the line, you can't even think clearly. It's hard to pull yourself out. You can. It's not that difficult, but you have to do it a certain way. But then we pull ourselves out, and we keep going back here. It reminds me of growing up. I love my dad's brother. They were very close together, and we did a lot together. Did a lot of working together, did a lot of outdoor activities together. And I remember whenever I'd get together with them, there was a certain feeling. There was a certain idea that happened time and time again. I could have come home from a date. I could have come home from having a great day at school, whatever it was. But when we got together and when we talked, I could have been over here, but the conversation would always end up somewhere over here on the negative side of the line. It wasn't the overtly negative side. They weren't talking generally negatively about people. It was more the subtle side of the line. The subtle side of the line over here was that life's hard. Now, to be fair, my dad and my uncle, they had a hard life growing up. It was actually quite hard. And if you look back in their family history, there's a lot of poor farmers. There was a lot of hard things that they went through. And that was passed on through generation to through generation. And my dad and his brother had it hard as well. They'd experienced a lot. And so their mindset was kind of that way, that life was hard. And because life was hard, life is hard. And so life will be hard. And the conversations were always about asking them about how my uncle, about how kids were or how other things are going on. We'd inevitably talk about how hard things were, the things that weren't going well. And love them to death. That's just kind of how it went. And it's how I was trained. Oftentimes when we talk about things, my own family, I talk about the negative side of things rather than the positive side of things, the doubtful side, the fearful side, the sad side, all that kind of a thing. And it definitely affects which side of the line I'm on. So let's talk a little bit more about this magnet. So we can find ourselves that we have tendencies to one way or another, but it's not just our tendencies that cause it. Did you know there is a huge pull one way or another way on this? And a lot of it today is a pull to the left side here, to the negative side, not just what you were taught by your parents or your experience in the past. It works kind of like this. You've ever heard you are what you eat? So here we have me there in the middle. And if I choose to consume these things, I don't have fancy ways to show it consume, but you can imagine what would happen to my body. My body is what it eats, right? And what I do with it. But generally, you would expect that my body would expand or break down, or my arteries would be clogged, or whatever it would be, my health would go down because I literally am. My body is what I feed it. That's all it is. It's what I do with it and what I feed it. That's about it. There's some environmental factors that go on there, but the macro level, that's what it is. So if I chose to not feed it that and to choose to feed it things that might be better for it, you can imagine what my body would do there. So that's so apparent to us on food, right? On bodies. But did you know that you're not just what you eat, you are what you think? So here we have the positive, the negative side, right? You are what you think, and you are what you feel. They're connected. In a future video, I'll talk about that as well. But it's true. Your body is what you eat, but what you feel is directly connected to what you think. And what you think is directly connected to what you experience. It's what you absorb. Now, it's not necessarily what you put in your mouth. It can be the sensation of taste. You can think of that. But it's what goes in through your eyes primarily, through your ears primarily. For sure, we also have touch and all that. But generally, when it comes to thinking, our eyes and ears are powerful organs that really bring things into our mind. And what's in our mind will cause us to go one way or another. It's like this magnet on this side. Anything negative, let's put some negative things in my mind here. So any negative that I have over here, this magnet will attract me over to the negative. Or any positive things that I have over here, whether they're feelings or thoughts, it will attract me to the positive. So I have both of these things tugging one way or another. And isn't it helpful to know that it's not just one side? I do have another side trying to pull me this way. The question is, what's in me to pull? What's pulling me to the left or pulling me to the right? You know, my grandfather, I talked about him in the last video. He wrote a book once, and he and his wife did a experiment once. They had this idea of the line, right? They were wondering, where's that pull coming from? So they did a little bit of an experiment. They opened up the newspaper. Now, he lived back when everyone read the newspaper, right? That's where you got your news. That's where you found out what was going on. So they grabbed the cover, the opening story of the newspaper, and they looked at that front spread on the newspaper. The most important stories were on the front spread of the newspaper. They looked through each of that. There were 44 columns of print in that front kind of section of the newspaper. And I think it was a full section. It wasn't just a page. Out of 44 columns, they read the column and they found that 41.8 of the 44 were negative. That was overtly negative or subtly negative. They were negative. They were talking about a negative thing, whatever it was. Only 2.2 of them were positive. That means 95% of what they were reading was negative, and only 5% was positive. So you can imagine which side of the line they were being pulled towards as they read that. And here's the interesting thing. Back then, I don't know if I can. You would read the newspaper morning and evening. When you started your day, you got the newspaper, the morning paper. You would read it with your coffee or with your breakfast. And you would fill yourself with that, and then you go to work. And what a great way to go to work, filled with 95% negative things to pull yourself that way. And then when you come home from work, thank goodness you're at home. You get to relax. You get to be with your loved ones. Sit down for dinner, and what do? We grab the evening paper. Oh my goodness. And fill ourselves with 95% negative things again so that we're with the ones that we love and so we can be pulled that way. Now, of course, that was back then. We don't even use the newspaper anymore, so we're not subject to this today, right? Right? Well, if it was 95% negative then, let's look at what we deal with today. Today we have things like news. We don't have newspaper. We have news on websites. We have news coming into our phone. We have news on apps. We have blogs with specific people writing about specific topics. We have social media that's coming through our phones all the time. We have media like YouTube, where you can go and you can see a whole host of media. You can spend lots of time on there. We have podcasts that come out daily, hourly even. Lots of different ways to consume news. So the question is it better today? Or is it the same? Or is it worse? I think it's pretty apparent. If you look at crime over the time period of my grandfather today, we'd say crime is more. We'd say war. Well, my grandfather, they did have war. War generally overall, and the amount of war seems to be growing, especially currently. Corruption, politics, even the content of our movies, contents of our books. I think overall we'd agree that generally negativity has abounded. It's thrived in a modern environment, which means what? It means we are getting pulled heavily this way. But here, that's not the only thing, unfortunately. So blog, evening news, apps on your phone, how much do you consume it? Well, maybe you're like some people, and the first thing they wake up to, they check their phone, they check their email, they check the news, they check their social media, they check. Okay? Then, but that's not it. That's the early morning when they couldn't get back to sleep. They go back to sleep. It's during the morning. They're getting ready, so they put on a news show to listen to as they're getting ready, or they check an email, or they listen to a podcast. So that's the early morning, then the morning check. Then we're eating breakfast. We'll watch what's on the news on our television, if it's cable or whatever. So that's the next check that we have. Then we're going to do our commute, and rather than just having it quiet during our commute, we'll turn on the radio and we'll listen to whatever that is, whether it's music or talk shows. Then we'll get to work. And after a little bit of work, we'll need a break. And so we'll check the news. We'll check if there's anything new on sports or new on the news, or check our favorite podcast or our blogs, things like that, or anything new on YouTube. Then at lunch, of course, we're taking a break. So we'll check things on our phones during lunch. And then, of course, in the afternoon, it gets kind of tiring. We have the afternoon break to check all these things again. And then if you're like me, sometimes it's the afternoon dead time where I do not even take a break. I just kind of get distracted and spend lots of time in the dead time there where I'm checking all this stuff ad nauseum. And I've checked it all before, so now I'm finding more stuff to do. Then it's coming home after, then we celebrate that work's finally done. And so we check our phone before we go home. We commute home. We listen to things on our way home. Then we get home. We're with the ones we love. We're at dinner. How many of us check the news at dinner, check our phone at dinner, talk about the stories that we've talked about all day and spread and hear what other people have talked about? Well, then we watch Netflix or other media online. And then before our bed, what do? Oftentimes we check our phone. This is a modern life. This may not be yours. This isn't exactly mine. But this is not too far from the norm of many people. And even if one or two or three of these things doesn't apply to you, I would guess that many do. So not only do we have a more negative amount of content likely going on, remember it was 95% negative back when my grandfather was doing this, which was decades ago. It's even more negative, and we're checking it more often. You can see how it might feel in our mind and our heart, if we've got all that negativity, we're going to get pulled here all the time. We're going to find that unless we actively do something, we'll just exist here. We'll end up here. Everything will seem and feel negative, and we'll just be there. That is the pull. That's the reality. The good news is that there is good news. There is a pull another way. So, it's time to clean house. We got to get rid of some things. If they're in us, it's going to pull us that way. We've got to get them out of us. So here's 5 things you can do to get it out of you. Number 1, realize what is it that I am consuming? What and how much media am I consuming? So where do I go? Where do I get my news? What is it? How much am I doing? Am I doing that much? Am I doing even more? Am I constantly plugged in? What am I listening to? Is it enlightening? Does it allow me to think and feel positive things? Or is it subtly negative or overtly negative? Right now, I'm hearing a lot of overtly negative stuff. What side of the line am I being pulled to? And then think about it. How is this affecting me? How's it affecting my family? How's it affecting my work? How's it affecting my friends? How's it affecting my life overall? If it's negative, and there's a good chance it is because you're alive like I am right now, and mine was certainly negative, it's time to clean house, my friend. So just start with one thing. What's one change I can make this week to cut out some negative and insert some positive? I did this a while ago, and what I committed to was not having the radio on, not having my phone, like listening to a podcast or anything like that as I commuted. That was time for me to think, and it was time for me to connect to family members. So I'd have positive conversations on the phone, or I would sit and I'd think about my life. I'd think about what I wanted to become. I think about my goals. I think about positive things that I read that morning. I'll tell you what, it made a huge difference. Another time I did it, I started running, and I decided that I no longer wanted to run with negative things in my mind. I wanted to only run with positive things. I was running taking care of my body. I wanted to take care of my mind and heart at the same time. So I only would listen to positive music. I would listen to positive presentations, positive books, positive talks. And I knew they were positive because, one, they were overtly positive generally, and for the feeling I felt when I listened to them. I felt enlivened. I felt excited. I felt happy. All those feelings we talked about on yesterday's principle, it was on that side of the line, which pulled me more to the right. So it's time to clean house. Recognize which side of the line you're on and recognize how much of you is getting pulled that way. Start cleaning. One thing, my friend, one thing that you can do this week to reduce that pull to the negative and increase the pull to the positive, and then just repeat that the next week and the next week. You'll be amazed at the change that comes. That's number 2. Stay around for number 3 tomorrow. We've got more to share on this. Thanks.